Okay, so welcome everybody. So I'm gonna start off with checking that we hear Sean. Can you speak a little bit?
Good morning, everyone.
Yeah, we hear you loud and clear. Thanks a lot.
Perfect.
Okay, so welcome everybody. Hope you had a good lunch break. So unfortunately, Mike Hellberg couldn't be here today, so I'll will be the moderator for this session. So what we wanted to do in this session was to essentially get together some companies that are collaborating in terms of data sharing and sort of look a little bit at sort of data integration between different companies and users of data and sort of get a better picture of data integration in general. So my plan is to let speakers speak as much as possible. Now you've already met, I think, all of the companies here. So we have two representatives from Hudl. So we have Lance and Andreas. And we have Albin from Stretch on Sense. And then we have Freddie from Malmö, Redhawks and Catapult. And then we have Sean from Sportlogiq. But that's sort of people you all know. What I want to do is some of you may not know them super well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to let each of these companies introduce themselves with a short introduction. So maybe Hudl can start us off.
Yeah. I think we shared our company already yesterday, so I think people can watch it again. We're sports technology company serving 35 sports at the moment, plus sports, and also working in having 4,000 employees by now, working in or operating from 20 offices in the whole world. And myself, I'm in the customer solutions team, who are doing more strategic consultancy and workflow assessment, workflow optimization with the clubs and federations and leagues. I'm more working on the projects, and Lance can speak for himself.
Kind of. Yeah, hi. I have a background in professional rugby, so 18 years as a performance analyst, but also as a lecturer in performance analysis technology within elite sport. I've been with Hudl now 5 years, lately as an implementation consultant, which is a tier below you, I believe.
We work in teams, not in tiers. And yeah, that's it. Myself, I have a football background, studied sport management and communication at German Sports University in Cologne. Highly recommend, a good place to visit as well. And then I made my way through football as an analyst, working also with a pro license course in Germany in football, and also working for the FA for more than 10 years now, and at Hudl for 5 years.
Cool. Yeah, thank you. You can take it from there. Albin Maelum, as you saw yesterday, I'm the CEO of Stretch on Sense. And we are, I will use, can't find you now, Torsten, but I will use your word. We are a sport tech company. But we are a sports analytics company, working with a platform that we are gathering all the great systems into one. We remove the silos and build them into one platform. My background, as I said yesterday, I play myself, not on a pro level, but I love hockey, I love sports, and I'm a classic data guy, from working with data my whole career, I would say. Yeah, shortly for me, Freddie.
Yeah, can you hear me? Yeah. Add-ons from yesterday. Yeah, representing Malmö Redhawks. As I say, I sacked myself and become a consultant for Malmö Redhawks. I work very close to the sports director, trying to building the team behind the team, performance team, drive them through for the future demands, making sure that we have right people, right equipment. Doing that kind of job now, but also from the Catapult. I've been using their system for 6 years now. So trying to become better both for myself and for the organization each day. Yep.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. And Sean, maybe you don't need an introduction, but please go ahead and introduce yourself and the company.
Sure. So I'll say good morning. I'm the one person not in the right time zone today. So happy to be with you. Thanks for doing it this way. I'm the director of hockey services at Sportlogiq. So we're a data tracking company. We're an AI-driven company that's providing data for leagues across the world. We're based in North America, but we've had a long-running relationship in Sweden and working with SHL, Hockey Allsvenskan, and expanding our coverage there. So many of the names, I can see some of the faces in the crowd, and at the table there too are people that we connect with trying to provide that data so that hockey people can do hockey work and use the data to drive all the decisions that they make, all the performance enhancements. Albin mentioned the idea of integrating across all of these data sources, and I know that's something that's been very key for us over the past couple of seasons, to be a partner with all the different groups here to just make sure that data is accessible for for everyone who's trying to make good hockey decisions. So that's me, and thanks for having me be part of this afternoon.
Thank you. So I mean, it's clear that all of these companies work with data, and in some cases it's sort of data that the companies collect themselves. In other cases, it's integrating from different data sources, as in the use cases that both Sean and Stretch and Sense Albin mentioned. So I wanted to have you go through a little bit in terms of what are the primary data sources that your company is looking at, and how do you integrate it with other data sources and tools in your company? And I think we can start in a reverse order. So I think we start with Sean first.
So maybe this is, I'm not sure if this is the best way to say it. I see Sportlogiq as a base for all of the work that gets done by all of the people that are sitting across this panel today, where we're kind of that ground truth of data from the game. So we have several thousand data points tracked from the game. We provide everything from shot attempts and time on ice to dump in recovery with a clean exit. So you get everywhere from the high level to the very granular. And I think the trick for a company like Sportlogiq, where we have just oceans of data available, is how do you then funnel it into the right way so that people behind the bench or in the front office or in the research lab or wherever can find their way into the data and pull things out that they can communicate to their teams to help drive results. So for us, I see us as kind of that foundation where the data starts here. All of the pieces you're going to need can come from Sportlogiq, and then from that, everyone can build off of, here's the video that goes with it, here's the systems we're going to put in place, here are the insights we can take away from it. That's kind of how I view our role in this process.
Thank you, and then we go to Freddie, who maybe can describe Catapult and the type of data that you provide and how that relates.
Yeah, first I'll rewind what I did talk about yesterday. We are monitoring every practice, every game. We take games as like a standard, big average, and comparing to the game demands. That's most for the performance department. We have the medical. We look on different metrics there. We also have metrics that I can more calculate and help my coaching team with. But as I said yesterday, that's the physical part of it. I know we are, then of course we are bringing more data as everyone else is here when it comes to strength, speed, power. It's still on the physical part. We collect data points when it comes to the medical, from the injury rates, of course. We have data points from different kind of strength index from the medical team. And then, of course, we're doing the same as everyone else. We collect from the tactical from Sportlogiq, and we do analyze from that part also. Yeah. So different silos collecting their data.
Yeah. Thank you. Albin.
Yeah, sure. So the product Hat-Trick, as I mentioned yesterday, so 3 legs in the product, and the sources and the systems is of course performance analysis, the game related, and then of course the mental health. So what we do is we combine them. So all the sources we're working with, so 1 + 1 gets 3, if I put it like that. So we don't leave one system or one source behind. We combine them and we find the correlation with them as well. So I would say, to answer your question there, I would say all the sources on the systems from these silos, I would say, working with them and custom made them for the clients, for your choice, I would say.
Thank you. So with the acquisition of Hudl Instat, of Instat Hockey, we now can have the data collection part. So we collect, I just got the number, 65,000 games per year, or in the last most recent season, which is by far the most. What we create is event data. So 5,000 to 6,000 data points per game on an event data side. And then I think yesterday was the question as well, we cooperate with also others like Speedio, like also the leagues, of course, for the footage to get that. Also with in Switzerland very heavily, and we're relying on these partnerships for sure. And then what I think on the video side, because that was also a question yesterday, with the video rights, we're investing a lot there to get the video rights, because it's more and more expensive. We see it in other sports, and also the leagues are getting this, that it's a true value and a big value for everyone. So on the utilization of the data, I think we then provide, next to the platform Hudl Insight, we provide the API, so the raw data. And this is heavily used by NHL teams at the moment, but also by leagues to verify, for example, the box score and their statistics, to double check it. And what I found also interesting is that we provide live data. We just provided it for the German team now in the World Cup, but also for others. There's one team in Sweden where we do that, and they're like, I think it's interesting, 7 analysts collecting this data live on the time, and these are the most experienced ones. So as you can imagine, we have 65,000 games per year. We need a big analysis team and really experienced people, and they're the most experienced. Then we have, next to the analyst, we have a checker always who double checks then the data and the accuracy, and also with the match reports. From there, I think it's important to name now, with the combination of Hudl Instat and then Sportscode, we just implemented, or will implement now, a direct Sportscode XML export from Hudl Instat. So teams can speed up their processes by making it usable for their game plan, making it usable for the individual development plans for the players, and also for visualization purposes then with Studio, our illustration tool. So it's, I would say, really start from end. We don't have the cameras ready yet for hockey, because hockey is a really fast sport, and the AI system needs to adapt there. But we are on that, and in the league we are partnering then, of course, with the camera provider or other data providers. I think key is then in Sportscode, as we have a data team in-house also doing consultancy, is then to combine the data sets, so event data, positional data, GPS data, and to come more to the truth and just exchange with Thomas. It's not about having the biggest data set. It's not about having everything you can. It's about how you manipulate it. And I see it more as a, sorry for the long speech. I see it more as a, how you say, controlling team. Like you can, a friend of mine is in Hugo Boss controller, and I see it more as a controlling add-on for coaches to double check, to verify, to utilize it, to speed up the process. So I think, that's in a nutshell. What we do is X and Y coordinates also for the raw data only. So I heavily hope it's growing with the university and the people there, with the data scientists also like you, that we can bring more people into the clubs to make use of the data, because I think a minimal amount of the data is used in a very efficient and good way.
I reflect on that one as well. I think it's like to help in the jungle. I mean, it can be a little bit if we take the jungle with the data as well, to actually help the clients of ours to actually find what they would like to look to, and not do the overall analysis on a helicopter mode, I would say, but also go down to the details as well, and work with the clients and custom made it as well. So, but I agree. No.
Oh, nice. Thanks for the perspective. So, I mean, you clearly sort of talked a little bit. So you give an example how you use data from Sportlogiq as an example. Several of you. So one thing I wanted to hear was sort of more concretely for each company, which companies do you actually concretely have a collaboration with? So
I can start. I mean, as Sean mentioned there, we're proud of our partnership with Sportlogiq. So correct me if I'm wrong, Sean, but I think we are the first and the first preferred partner to Sportlogiq in the Europe as well. So I mean, that's something we're really proud of, and we are working closely with Sean and his team in US, but of course John here in Sweden and Albin as well. So I mean, we have a close collaboration with each other, but also I can see Irva here now, but working closely with him as well. And I mean, but we have an official partnership with them, but I mean, would like to work, or we're working with all these great systems. I mean, now I see you, Torsten, I was looking for you, but I mean, all the great systems, of course, but to name one, you asked specifically for one, then yeah, Sportlogiq. So Sean.
So one thought for Sean. So Freddie, so I mean, you're working for Catapult, so that's
no, I'm working for Malmö Redhawks, but Catapult called me and asked me to come. So yeah, but we have a lot of system, and that's also a part of it, because I'm from the practical side. I've been working 10 years now. The data started to get a lot, and it just has increased. And of course, I put myself question: has it really helped us? So we are starting to like invest that we are using the system in the best way we can. So yeah, for just monitoring, we are using Catapult, and has been a game changer. When it comes to the daily workflow from like an athlete management system, we have XPS working with them. When it comes to the bigger, as I mentioned yesterday, making tactical, technical, physical, psychological part, bringing together much deeper analysis. We are using Hattrick. So depending on what we want with the data, we have different kind of companies helping us with that.
So I mean, one thing I hear is you're using these different data sources, but how much do you integrate it? So how much do you use data with data from a different data source to correlations, or sort of getting complementing information in the same system? Do you build sort of an integration system, or is it more I get information from here and information from here? So I go back to sort of extend your question.
Yeah, that's a really good question, because that's a question I have asked myself a long time. Because as I said yesterday, on the performance department, or from the strength and conditioning, we have just like sometimes chasing numbers. We want players to get speedier. We want players to get more endurance. We want players to raise them up on all the physical values, but that takes time. It comes with also a risk of injury, of course. And also question, is it always good to ramp up this as high as I can? I take one example. We had one player this year. We knew very early, I suppose to say, that we were going to be in the negative qualification against Brynäs this year. we saw that we had some players that was ramping up the intensity on the practice, on the games, but we saw also that the KPIs from the Sportlogiq was not so good. We took an action. We put in some work when it comes to more on the technical, making him a little bit more awareness, making more time and space out on the ice. The intensity went down, the explosive ratio went down, but suddenly his KPIs and the Sportlogiq went up. So that's one question I would like to bring in a little bit more deeper on, and we have just started that how to integrate physical, but also technical data instead of just like these silos.
And then sort of is that using like similar to Albin talked about yesterday, how they had sort of the well-being, the physical, and I think there was another one where you sort of get red, yellow, and green.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the type of where you sort of bring together a couple of metrics.
Yeah, exactly. Because I mentioned like visualize data for us, or I should mention again, I'm not a data guy, but I was forced to know hockey more. But you are here like experts, you do research papers and so on. But to visualize something that you feel is really good, then you come to the head coach and you visualize this, and he doesn't get it at all.
Yeah.
So that's also a thing we must have in mind, that even if we think we are doing a good job, you can add that even one more step to visualize it in a much more proper way, because they are the ones that take action. They are the ones that get, to be honest, the head coach, they are the ones that get fired if the team doesn't proceed very well. We are a little bit safer. So I think you have to have respect for that, because all of the things you are taking the report to the head coach, to the coaching team, they are making decision on that later, and they are in the most dangerous position, I would say.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. And then if we move over to Albin, so now, I mean, you're taking information from different data sources and sort of putting them together.
Yep.
What are sort of the biggest challenges there? Is it sort of the collaboration, finding collaboration with other companies, or is it how is sort of the integration part? What are the bottlenecks there?
Good question. I mean, from a technical point, I mean, what we need is an API to get the data, I would say. Good question. What's the tricky part is, but I mean, because if the client, the team is working with the system, they can also request an API, and we are coming in as a third party as well. I don't know if I answer your question there, but the technical part, no. So maybe then to get the key to the API, then if I put it like that.
Yeah. Well, that makes sense. And Hudl, what's your experience in terms of sort of integrating with other data sources? What is the biggest challenge there?
I think speeding up the coaching process is going to be at the core of your decisions about who you partner up with. So if it's going to be something that you're going to integrate in, just because it gives you a bigger data set, if that doesn't have any practical value, as in giving the coaches more time on the ice with the players, or whichever scenario you're looking at, whichever sport you're looking at, then it loses its value immediately straight from there, and the learning curve and everything else. So yes, you need data sets. You need to be integrating with, I suppose, challenges, new technology. I mean, looking at things like the Apple announcements the other day with the headsets, immediately the first thing I thought of was bringing players back from injuries and using it as a visualization tool, immersing them. It's already being done by video walls. You can project on the video walls and stimulate, basically stimulate different types of responses from the players or speed up their learning processes. But I think you should keep an open mind with collaborating with every other company if it's going to enhance what your core belief is. And because ours is actually to improve the performance of players and coaches, then I don't think anything's off the table really with who you work with and how you work with them, as long as there's a mutual trust there between each other. I know we work with Sportlogiq, for example, with the integration that they have on their user interface, and we'll develop the same and go beyond that with Hudl Instat, obviously, with it being inside of our ecosystem now within Hudl. But it's literally just, again, going back to the first part, it is just about improving the player performance, utilizing the statistics that you have available to you. Don't go crazy with trying to just gather more and more and more. You know, just take what you have at the moment, use it wisely.
Yeah, no, thank you. So, I mean, Sean, we've heard that several of these companies are working with you. Can you give some insights into which companies do you work with, and how do you work with other companies?
Right. So I think it's really interesting as we go across the panel. We're all from different companies. Some of us do similar things or have overlap or even competition to some extent. But you're hearing how we're all integrated with each other too. And I think that's really key to think about what we're all trying to do, which is help a coach, like we heard at the start of this, help a coach make a good decision because they're the one that has their neck on the line. How do you help players get better? How do you bring all the different pieces of data we have together to help people make better decisions? And it's a point I come back to all the time. I'm a bit of a repetitive person on this, but a couple of the points early here I think were really key. What's the role of visualization to help communicate something? We see that in something like Hat Trick or what we have on our own platform or what we all are trying to do. How do you make something easily understood by the client so they can act on it? And if you're getting something from Sportlogiq that says performance is up, but you're getting something from the physical side that says, due to lack of rest, performance is down. How do you give the tools to the people in the room to say, how do these things fit together so we can make a good decision? So the great thing is we're looking at different companies here today that are all working in the space, doing different things. We have different clients, whatever that is, but we're all also integrated because we all see the goal of helping teams do better, be better, perform better. So we have all four here. We're all integrated to some extent with each other. That's just going to grow. There's a lot of room for data analysis to grow, North American side, European side. I think there's a lot of space still for this integration of different companies to expand even while we continue to build out our own systems and do the things we do day to day as well.
Thank you. So I mean, many of these systems that you have, they're targeting sort of the clubs or the leagues, etc. But it was also mentioned yesterday that there might be other sort of service models where sort of all of a sudden you can have individual positions that maybe have one or two players. So how do your companies sort of see the opportunities for that type of market, and is that at all sort of something that is feasible with these things? Like, I mean, if I'm gonna have to be a customer of Sportlogiq and of Stretch and Sense, like as an individual positions, I might not have the resources to buy into that. Do you think there's a market, and how do you see the collaboration in terms of data sharing between companies and data sharing with
as a private person, then you mean, or?
Yeah, so say that Freddie go and say, okay, I'm not gonna work for Malmö, I'm gonna just work for this particular player.
Yeah.
And would that be feasible in today's landscape?
I can take that one. Yeah, that's actually something we are discussing. I don't want to call any names, but yeah, we have that discussion, because if we see how the Swedish teams, for example, are doing their summer training, of course they are by themselves for a couple of weeks, but they in the past and historically we are training together. Looking at over the seas, we have you're coming home to Sweden or Switzerland or Germany or whatever, and you do your own practices. There we find actually to work with the players so they can see, because then they can have the performance part as well. And yes, they need a system, but yeah, we are in those dialogues, and I think that can be a very interesting future for the sports analytics part as well. Not only working with the clients and the league, the clubs in the league, but also actually with the personal trainer or the agencies or whatever. So yeah,
I think if I can,
of course, shoot,
continue.
Yeah.
Like just a 4 month, worked very closely with a football coach, and they got sacked. So what do? You don't have maybe access to a software tool. You might not have access anymore to whatever platform. And you need to find ways. So, and we are supporting always the people who are out of job, because that's the time where they have time to rethink processes. That's the time also for players which are not in the season, but also for players and agents. So of course they can make use of video and data. And it's growing. It's always then on the playbook, for example, creation stuff, or the playing style. We even create pitch decks for coaches who then go to another club, or we support clubs doing a head coach search, for example. Why should I get this coach in? Not only from a personal point and a mental point, but also from a data point. And actually a coach used our dashboards to pitch himself at the club, and he got the job. Not, of course, it just was one slide, but it's an additional layer and a proof of concept if you can use it. And 100%.
Yeah, I mean, I've worked in the past whereby I've had coaches reach out to me directly just to use or get access to software when maybe the club have gone in a different direction, just because they're used to using one particular type of software. Same thing with some players. I've done individual work with head injury assessments within rugby, looking at trying to get players back to playing again, or even that scary thing about having to retire because you've taken one too many blows to the head. But they would utilize the software to look at their individual technique, to try and improve their individual technique so that they can carry on with their careers. So sometimes you have to apply, I suppose, a more personal approach to it with different people, and not be. We're lucky because we come from coaching backgrounds, and that, you know, the business side of it, we have other people who deal with that. So we kind of make the case and be devil's advocate a little bit for those situations. But you're right, there's a finite, you know, pot of resources at each individual club. And me personally, I take the viewpoint of looking at maybe, you know, a 3 to 5 year plan of where the club wants to go and what tools to use. And in my early career, I would use 4 or 5 different types of analysis software to get the job done, whether it be looking at a tactical, more team point of view, or individual point of view. I won't name the companies which software is always using, but widely used in things like gymnastics. I would look to other sports and see how they did it, and then try and integrate it. And now we're in a lucky position on being on the inside of a company whereby we can make these suggestions and make these arguments, and then usually the people above us will come back with a finite decision on that.
Okay, thank you. Freddie, what's your take?
Yeah, from 2 perspectives. First, if I go from the Catapult's perspective, I know that they are, if we leave hockey, I know they are doing the same thing with the same kind of measurement on tennis player. Tennis player is individual. They have one individual coach. They are traveling around the world. So I know from that, they have the API that goes into all of their systems. So for that, to have those kind of possibility, because I always also, before I went into the hockey, work as a consultant for individuals. That would be an awesome thing, because you have performance numbers, you have monitoring from their training practice, you have Aura rings that comes in. So from that perspective, it would be great for an individual coach to also have access from it. From Malmö Redhawks standpoint, we have still 400 players coming from around the world, Canada, Finland, and they are not here during the summer. And of course, we have a collaboration with those strength coaches. To be able to share reports from those systems is also a benefit for us because we have different demands that we want them to reach before they come into our club. So it makes more easier for us, of course. I had a discussion with one of the general manager here in SHL, how the future is. Maybe some teams are going the whole summer together. Some teams, they have different players around the world joining them when the season starts. And of course, that would be a great way to get better reports how the process is going.
Yeah, thank you. So Sean, I mean, you have a contract with SHL and Allsvenskan, so very big contracts, but how do you see sort of smaller contracts with individuals, etc., in the future?
Well, I think it was said in the panel here along the way, I'm not the business person, which is great because I would be horrible at it. I think the distinction that we draw between tennis, gymnastics, maybe something like golf, where a coach and an individual player, they are their own team. That makes a lot of sense to have a provider connect directly. When we're talking about hockey, I think there are a couple of challenges still. For us, it's not a place we are today in terms of the players. The coach would be, that's a different thing when they're in between positions, and how do you support people then? For a player in hockey especially, it's such a team sport that I think there's a balance there. What are you providing to a player in the context of the team? And if you're providing some sort of data, some sort of report, does the player get the right takeaway from it? Is that where they are? And is that what the coach or what the team asks of them? And are you helping them learn to drive to the inner slot to get as many shot attempts as they can? But it turns out that they're a third pair defenseman, and it's really not what the coach is looking for when they show back up in October. So because of the nature of hockey, I think there are certain challenges to, connecting directly to a player. At the same time, there's such potential, and we talked about integration with performance data earlier. How can Sportlogiq data and performance, like training and rest and workload, how could we take those pieces and provide something to a player for off-season training that says, here are places in the season where we notice performance dip. October to November, early in the season, we see a month where your workload really dropped or your performance really dropped. Is that something that could go straight to a player with the league, supporting, the team supporting, but you go right to the player to say, here's a takeaway, an insight that you can go and train this summer to be ready to go? There's definitely a route there. And then on the coaching piece, it was raised earlier too. I think that that's really smart, just to keep those people who know your platform, they know your data. If you can support them when they're in between positions, in the end, all we want is this analytics movement really has steam behind it. And you want a coach to have that in their slide deck when they go for the next job, and for it to be one part of the reason they get hired. We want to continue to build that capacity. 10 years ago, that's not where it was. Today, if you don't have that slide in your slide deck, you're probably not getting the job. So for us, I think there's a couple of different ways it could go. But again, I'm not the business person, and I'm really pleased that I'm not. I get to think big about how this could grow the hockey space, and I get to keep myself there.
Yeah, thank you. So I mean, one thing I see is that, okay, this conference also highlights that, okay, there's a whole bunch of data, there's more data, there's better data, and to provide value to the teams, etc. We have all these tools and systems that all of these companies provide. But a question then becomes, if there's value in the tools and there's supposedly some value in the data, who owns the data? Is it the company doing the recordings, or is it who owns it, or is it even the players that are in the photos? Or and so I'm gonna ask this question in two perspectives. One is, what's your current view, and what do you think that it will look like 5 years from now? Is it going to be the same entity that owns the data? And I think I want to start with Sean. So I mean, you're a big data source. How do you look at this question?
Yeah, it's a really interesting challenge. We actually touched on this a year ago in the conference as well, and the question I think is still very open on where that goes. I'm really interested in other sports as well, and in the North American perspective, watching NIL and how that's changed the landscape there is really interesting. You know, I'm a poor forecaster in certain ways. I'm not sure where it goes. Right now, having a league partnership with a data provider, it makes a lot of sense where that ownership lies. The league and the players agree to work together, agree to work with us, and we share that data. So I see those lines as really direct and clear. But is there a different version of this agreement 5 years down the road? It's possible. Again, I think in a league and team sport, there's one way of viewing how this goes. Something like golf, something like skiing, something where there's more individual. That one I can see a path where there's some sort of individual piece that makes a lot of sense. When you're talking about a team sport and a team league, I think it's a little bit different. But I agree. I think it's a question that's growing and doesn't necessarily have answers just yet.
Thank you. So I'll move over to Freddie. Who do you see? I mean, you're working with catapult data, even where it's sort of very individual data in some sense.
Yeah.
Who do you think will be the owner of data 5 years?
It's a really good question. To be honest, I don't have a good answer. I had one example. I had a player 4 years ago after he went from Malmö. He called me and said that he wanted all of the data from the physical, especially from the catapult erased from the system. So we did that because of the GDPR, or what do you call it? So that was also one reason why we wanted to put all of the data in one place, because if you go back 10 years ago, I had on my computer, the coaches had on one computer, it was in Excel, all of the files, all of the data. So we had no clue where we had the data. So I don't know if I answer your question. I think all of the data we have tracking is like, it's high integrity. We took the Aura rings, we did a sleep project in Malmö. We have a catapult. So it's a sensible question that I don't really have an answer on, to be honest.
And do the players sign any sort of contract or sort of document with Malmö before you do this edit?
Not when we record, but if we want to share it together, like example, when we do a crossover for the sleep together with the performance, they will sign the agreement. The same thing for the medical injury, where we share things. They always sign a contract that it's okay to use this data in like integration of something else. Yes, it is.
Yeah, no, thanks. Albin, what's your take?
Yeah, no, I can just reflect on that. If I take the mental health part and the well-being part as well, I mean, it's the player who owns it, but the team has the right to use it in the same way as a third-party company as we have the right to use it, the same as Freddie mentioned there. I mean, of course, if we are measuring the sleep and everything with this Aura rings, of course, the player needs to give an approval that we actually can do that. So yes, we have that in place, and talking with Sean and Sportlogiq, can only agree with him. I mean, it's an open question there, but the more, I think it's more sensitive, as Freddie said as well, when we are talking about the performance part and especially the mental health part. I mean, if you are sitting and talking to a sports psychologist, thank you. I mean, that's super sensitive information, and that information you don't want to even share with the coach, because I was longest story short, there it was. We have and that's something we are proud of, but we are also humble with it. So, I mean, of course, I love hockey, but I'm not an expert as you guys are in the room. And we have an advisory board with ex-professionals in the performance part, but also in the game, the ex-NHL profs and the KHL and the SHL profs. Pros, but also on the mental health part, and we had a discussion how can we do this and to not share it in the whole organization, because then the guy we work with, he told like, yeah, before the season when I was playing, I told him like I was skating a little bit bad due to my hip. Everything this coach, not everyone, not every coach, but this coach was always looking at his skating the whole season. Like he didn't skate any good, and he thought it was like, why did I share that with the coach? Of course, the coach needs to know if I have an injury or if I don't feel good due to, it can be whatever. If you're in a divorce, you don't feel good, and then you don't play good. So I mean, that information is so sensitive. So I think that's the player owns it, but the team has the right to use it, and the third party as Hattrick and Stretch on Sense can also use it. But yeah.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Yeah. Just on the, I truly agree to on the sensitivity part, and every stakeholder is more aware on how to integrate it on a contract, and is aware that especially in Europe, this is needed because you can get in trouble. We have the discussion with cameras. Every parent now setting up a camera in Germany and filming the boys playing football, which is insane. And then publishing something on social media. So, for example, with Hudl, you cannot download as a player video and publish it. But you also have, as a coach, the opportunity to watch on the activity. So you know when the player watched what clip for how long. So it's also a thing, okay, you should put it on the contract as a team that you can do this. As a coach, it helps you. What I found on the mental part interesting, I spoke to a coach, and it's all about individual development plans for them. So they have the approach to use a technical, a tactical, and a mental element on what they work on with the players. And they define it with the player together. So the player comes, they watch the video beforehand, they have a plan in mind, but they ask the player, okay, where do we want to get developed? And they ask the player, hey, do you want to do a mental test? Because it helps you at the end to get some feedback from the psychologist and from this test, and it helps us to understand you better as a person and the personality, and also in the team structure, because this is also important. So I think and one time, like with wearables, it's not our solution, but I heard from Borussia Dortmund, one player put it in his contract that he's not allowed, like he doesn't need to wear any time GPS system. So I think players are more aware of that, and we got asked to erase people from Hudl from college teams, which nobody cares about actually, but they're there and they don't want to be seen in Google. So everyone has this right, and we need to erase it. So it's good, I think, in general, that everyone is more aware.
Okay, thank you. So now we've sort of established that, well, we have this data and how we can sort of some complications with it, but ignoring that, we can do better things in some sense if we get things from different data sources. So what do you see sort of the next step in terms of applying machine learning, deep learning, etc.? What methods or what technical solutions would your companies be interested in developing? So I mean, I'm gonna go. So I mean, yesterday's talk, Shaika mentioned sort of voice prompting, and it was clear this Finnish company had sort of played around with it, whatever results one get. So I guess I don't know if everybody know these large language models, but you have ChatGPT, etc. You can ask it questions and it gives you an answer. But you should not trust the answer because it's just auto-generated based on sort of a model of language. So it's highly unreliable, but it gives you an answer, and it might be quite convincing. So that's a new technology that has come in the last year. Everybody are excited about it. Do you see this technology, or are there other sort of hot things that you want to build into your system or want others to build into your systems? So I start with Sean. I mean, you have a lot of deep learning in your company with sort of image processing. So you have a lot of those skill sets already. So that's why I asked you first.
Yeah, I agree. In terms of the large language models, I think like that has really blown up in the past few months. It's not even a year into the ChatGPT sort of movement. So where that goes in particular, I'm not sure. Can this be used down the road as something that generates reports and helps analysts, you know, with the right dials? Could you possibly produce things for your coach quicker? I'm not sure how reliable that is yet or how far off we are from that. In terms of the computer vision and how you can track data in games, that's something that we are heavily investing in over time, trying to just increase the accuracy of what we're doing. I don't think anyone would say that anything is 100% today. And even if you're 95%, coaches will find that 1 in 100 that isn't right. And now you've lost, you know, that fraction of trust. So I think there's a lot to do with what we have in terms of improving our computer vision, improving our AI. For me, something I would say 2 things specific to hockey, just because, you know, the nature of the conference that we're in. One is I think sequences in the game is something that we really haven't scratched enough yet. So we're very good at saying, you know, 4,000, 5,000, 10,000 data points. Here's what we can measure piece, even put a couple things together. But what is a longer form sequence? What is a period worth of sequences? How can we analyze a team's systems in terms of sequences of plays? That's something where machine learning, you can imagine the neural networks that could be developed to say these sorts of systems over time tend to produce these on ice results. I'm a little out of my league going any further than that on that, other than to say, I think there's a lot of room to push on, you know, just how can neural networks, how can machine learning be used to suggest a system based on the types of players. We can tell you about your players today. Can we build that out into a suggested, here's what your team could do, should do? So there's a lot there. The other place I think, and you know, there's others sitting here at the table, so maybe they'll disagree. They may well. I think that goaltending is a place where there's a lot of room to expand what we're able to say using the data that we generate in terms of workload, in terms of movement for a goalie, in terms of what types of shots give what goalies the most difficulty, the least difficulty. I think we can analyze performance really well for a goaltender, but I think of the NHL playoffs, just we're still sort of right at the tail end of it. We saw a couple of teams that had goalies that almost split workloads through the season. Can we integrate data from different sources? Can we develop models that suggest, here's how many games your starter should play in a season? They really are a 50% workload type of goalie. This is an 80% workload type of goalie. So maybe I'm not dreaming as big as ChatGPT and all the ways we could use that next. I just think that there's a lot of hockey specific work we could do on the systems, the goaltending, and the kind of on ice suggestions we could be making for teams. And that's all driven through machine learning, through models that really require a lot of data to get actionable insights.
So in some sense, you're saying better statistical and machine learning models to get more insights out of the data rather than a new chat interface for coaches then.
Yes, but I wouldn't rule that out either. I think it's really interesting. I'm one of those people who spends, 20 minutes too long on ChatGPT each day, just seeing how it's improving and seeing what it's capable of doing. I don't trust it yet either. I listen to a lot of the podcasts on the hallucinations that it's capable of still, the bias that's in it. One challenge, I think, to a ChatGPT being a chatbot for your site or an insight generator is it's less likely to think of new ideas because it's trained on language that it's been able to take in. So what are the chances it has an imaginative new idea, something outside the box? Maybe a little bit less, at least today. So I wouldn't rule it out at all. I think it's really interesting. I think there's lower hanging fruit still on the ice for our teams. I'd rather take chops at that first and just keep this in the back of our mind and let it grow for a year before we see what it's really capable of.
Okay, thank you. So I think we can move to Hudls. I mean, this might be in your ballpark as well.
I see three things. So automate and then make use of AI based software, hardware, etc. Utilize the raw data. I think to then find the moments on the fly you need as a coach, as whatever persona, and combine the data sets with the expertise we have here. I have next to myself, and growing the team there. But I think, and I had it again from the Dutch hockey coach, I think today you compete against, and we have this after a training session, we have this after games, we have this in general, we compete against Instagram, TikTok, etc. with the players. So they have attraction, and you need to get better as a coach, as a team, in storytelling, because this then sticks in the mind of the players. This is how they develop. This is how you can go to the general manager or the decision makers to prove, okay, that's why I need another person, another coach, another whatever system to get better there. And this is a lot about storytelling, and on the mental side to create this performance culture and more growth mindset within the players, but within the whole club. So have a common goal, common vision as a club, and then utilize technology as a helper, but really work on that common vision first, and then integrate the stuff you have or you want.
Yeah, thank you, Albin.
Yeah, I mean, to back to your question there, and I think I'm not gonna go into that discussion with the AI and machine learning in the future we have it there, because I mean we can sit here for a couple of hours there. What I can say, in my opinion, I mean we have a super interesting future ahead of us. But we have with Hat-Trick, we have actually started playing around a little bit with machine learning, a little bit less wise hockey mentioned yesterday as well. But how can we solve the $1 million question? How can we win a hockey game? And something we are playing around with. So which metrics and KPIs do you need to win to actually win the hockey game? That's something we are playing around with. I mean, a little bit, as Sean said as well, I mean, I think we need to work with what we have today as well. But yes, it's super interesting future ahead of us. And I think we just need to work with the technology that's coming to us in the correct way, because it's going so fast. So we can barely keep up with it. But are we working in the correct way with it? I think we have a great and a super interesting future of us, especially in hockey analytics, definitely, and sports analytics overall, I would say. But yeah, interesting future for sure.
And then for Freddie, I tweak the question a little bit. So, I mean, we'll make it a little bit more challenging for you.
Okay. So I thought this was challenging, but okay, go ahead.
No, I'm thinking there in terms of, okay, if you bring it down to individual player level,
yeah.
Do you think there's anything? So I mean, there you have different information sources if you want to have a well-being human being, and do you think there's sort of ways of using machine learning statistics to really help a person feel better, I suppose?
That's a really good question. Sometimes I feel all of this data, we forgot that we are working with humans. So all of this data that has come in, just to rewind what the other guys were saying, I think to answer that question also, I think what we have, we need to do a little bit better job of what we have, because I work out there in the practical field. I have colleagues that have contact in Premier League, in NHL, in Allsvenskan. They have tremendous system. To be honest, none of them are using everything. So why aren't using everything yet? Because I still think it's a little bit complex. and I think we have to do better things with the things we have before we take the next step. To answer your first question, and the other one, same thing. It's data, but sometimes we think there are machines that we forgot to develop the human behind the player. I just mentioned because as a strength coach. Before, if you go back 5, 6, 7 years ago, there was like you were going to, I say it again, you were responsible to bring them more speed, more strength, more endurance. Now, another part of the field coming into our field is the cognitive thinking. With all of this data, we are going to show video to the players. They are in Instagram. There's a lot of pressure. You are sending video to them in between the periods and so on. And then they are making mistakes that we talk to them and say, how could they make that mistakes? There's a thing which I think is really interesting now. It's like the brain fatigue, cognitive thinking. That's also a part for us in the performance team. Where all of this data is coming, there's another point that we must take action on. How do we integrate that kind of training into our players? There's some papers on it now, we're calling brain endurance training. I think that's a really, really interesting for us as the performance team to look up with all of this data coming in, because the player, I don't think they can handle it, to be honest. I don't know if I answer your question, but, no, that's a little bit from a practical view, because we want to prepare the players for the coaches, for the teams. But all of this data puts another pressure on them. Yeah.
Can I add one thing? Sorry, I spoke to because on that with us at Alkmaar, they have a lifestyle head of lifestyle, Bart Hoijving. Dutch guys are really creative always, no? And he's working on exactly that aspect. And he said, we measure the hardware, but we train the software. So they support them to train the software. And I think that was quite wise. And happy to connect you to him. Yeah, I think for you it would be a great exchange.
Because we're all talking about like raw data and so on, because now I think more of the soft values can also come in and take a bigger place, because as I mentioned before, there are humans that we are working with.
No, and it's humans that these players that then in the end are the ones performing. So another aspect there is, and so I mean we put measures on them, and we measure their health and well-being, and we want them all to perform as well as possible individually and as a team. But sometimes there's these intangibles in terms of what's make a player great. So I mean we talked before about Connor Bedard, for example. Okay, I can measure different things, and I can say, well, okay, but then in the end, there's something else. So I'm gonna ask each of the companies, how do you think that one measure that is possible by just measuring how quickly they run, or what type of data would you like to see in the future to actually be able to identify this is going to be the next superstar? Do you have like a wish list of this data? If we had access to that, we would be able to predict the next superstar. We would be able to compose the best team ever.
Great question, but I would say the cognitive, as Freddie mentioned there. Actually, I think that's going to be a hot potato in a couple of years. I think that's an interesting area as well to jump into. So, yeah, something like that to develop that part and that area of sport analytics.
I believe the study was done years ago in American football on one of the quarterbacks there, who was basically developed from a really early age. I remember seeing a documentary where he was given certain physical challenges from like being a really, really young boy by his father, and then he went on and played in the NFL. So developed. You see a lot of footballers, their sons coming through and playing. Obviously, Haaland at the moment at Manchester City is a really good example. But there is a lack of, I think, historical data collected at clubs. to say, you know, what did this player look like at this particular age? But also you've got to factor in, you know, their backgrounds. What have they come through? So mentally, you don't know what adversity they've been able to push through to make it to the very, very top, and to try and manufacture a player. First of all, you need to know what do you want your player to look like? You know, so what does a player at your particular club in a particular position, what attributes do they have? Physical attributes, you know, mental attributes, skill-wise. And a lot of times, I mean, you can train the sort of the skill level, and you can train the physical level to the maximum for that particular individual. You can't make them into something that they're not, but you could utilize the ability they have, so they may have something a little bit different. So I'd be really careful about selecting particular statistics to say, if we get a player who's 6'4", blonde hair, you know, comes from Norway, he's going to be the next Haaland. No, I'm sure there's quite a lot of 6'4" blonde Norwegians running around out there, but they're all not going to play football to a really, really high level, and that goes for every single sport. And trying to isolate statistics within ice hockey, with it being like going back to when you said about using the artificial intelligence, well, it's such a fast sport. Some sports lend themselves to that type of technology. Some sports don't. It's and sometimes maybe you just need somebody who's incredibly aggressive on your team. He's the missing link in your team, being winning a championship and not winning a championship. And you know, it's something that's going to be really, really difficult to measure. You know, how do you get a statistic for how aggressive a player is? Is it how many minutes he spent in the penalty box? How many fights has he got into as he's come up through the youth age groups? Because if that's the case, then maybe you should recruit more from my sport of rugby. You get some good athletes from there. But yeah, it's really difficult. I think it's about having a model for your club, having a model for each position, and giving people the chance. They'll mature at different age groups, different age levels. So what you think is going to be a good prospect at their team, or maybe even younger, 10, 11, they go through a growth spurt and suddenly they become less coordinated. So yeah, incredibly difficult to isolate one star.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'll let Sean give it a try, but yeah.
So I was thinking as we're talking about this is a data integration panel, but this question kind of speaks to the need to integrate, like the cognitive piece we've spoken about, the data piece we've spoken about. But when we're thinking about, like, to go back to Connor Bedard as an example, how do we identify somebody many years out is going to be great? You can see that it's going to take more than just data. How do you compare Connor Bedard and Leo Carlsson playing in such different situations? You know, who are their line mates? What's the strength of the league? Data can help you with this, but the data integration is just one part. This is where the scouts, the coaches, the management, where all that soft skill, I think Freddie has spoken to that a couple of times here in his answers, that the soft part of the game, the human part of the game is really key. How do you bring scouts in with the data as all part of a conversation on equal footing to say, we can see in this player the doggedness that's going to translate, the fighter in this player that's going to translate down the road. We know this from the scouts, the data shows us this, and then we watch it over a long time to see how it works out. That integration of data, scouting, patience, time, that could help. At the same time, though, you look at Connor Bedard and, you know, the shot, the release, obvious, you know, the hockey sense, you see it. But if we're looking for that 6'4" Norwegian who's going to be a star in the league for sure, that's not this player. And so in any of these models we might build, you might exclude a player like that along the way because the height isn't there, the physical piece isn't there. But if you're watching the player and checking the data, trusting your scouts, you catch it. So I think what it really is, we've all said it at one point or another, coaches have to feel like they're involved. Players have to feel like they're involved. Scouts isn't one we've talked a lot about. They need to feel involved, and the data. If you can bring all those people together and you have patience over time, that's how you're going to be able to identify these players that turn into stars and pick out the ones that aren't going to develop. But no one tool is going to do it on its own. And if we get too married to one, you might miss the 5'10" first overall pick in a draft too. So I think this integration goes beyond our companies and our data to all the different parts of an organization that help make decisions.
Yeah, good answer. Do you want to add anything, Freddie?
No, I don't think I have anything to add to this.
I think
If I'm just going to answer one, I think it's also the cognitive. You just want one answer. No, and agree with other speakers.
No, and I think you gave a pretty nice overview yesterday over sort of the importance of, integrating these different aspects in the evaluation of a player.
Yeah. Well, again, you always talk about from your sick mother's perspective, but that's the experience I have had during this 10 years now, that still everyone is talking about it, but still no one can actually bring all this together in a chaotic world, because it's a chaotic world out there. During the summer, it's easy. Everyone is there, playing games, and then suddenly it starts. Yeah. And then you win, you lose, and suddenly it gets chaotic. And then you need to have this form of where you look at the player from this kind of view to actually help the player, but also to structure for the players to have them within in the way of develop the player. So yeah, I think still that is important, really, really important.
Thanks.
Think long term in a short term world.
Yeah.
So now I wanted to open up if there's any final questions to any of these individuals. Patrick?
Yeah, I may actually have two questions. We know that integration is very difficult. We work on integration of biomedical data and material science data. So it is a difficult thing. So I've actually two questions based on the type of data. The first one is that for the integration systems, when you're going to integrate data from two different providers that do the same thing slightly differently. So for instance, expected goals. How do you do? What do you trust? Do you make your own variant of it? The second question is, when you're going to integrate data from performance, games, health, are you at the level of making that data accessible in one system, but the use and the analysis is by, for instance, the performance director? Or is there already a way that you know that this kind of health data will have this kind of influence on the game? If you see this in the game, you know something about the health and vice versa. Are there theories like that that are already implemented in these systems, or is it mainly at the level of making the data accessible?
Albin, do you want to start?
Yeah, the first question there, combining the different systems. Yeah, what we have seen, you took one example there. Yeah, sometimes we need to tweak them and modify them. That's correct. I'm happy that I have a great development team with me. So yeah, sometimes we need to do that. Sometimes not. The other question there, can you please elaborate a little bit more so I can give you an answer?
It's mainly that if you have health data, you have event data from the games, you have mental health data maybe. Is it that you make these different kinds of data available in your system so that the coaches can look at it? Or is there already a deeper integration in the sense that maybe if there's this kind of health data, you know that this will have an effect in the game, which you will already see later on, which you can predict.
Oh yeah.
For what it happens.
No, I would say, yeah, protect the game. Well, protect that's a hard one, I would say, but I will go for the first option you said there, to have it visible and combine the systems, combine them, so the visibility, and make it easy as well. I mean, I think Freddie, you mentioned it, to have it very, very easily, so you can see, so you really know what you're watching and actually analyzing. Not, you have to understand the data, and with visualizations and so on, you can do that even better. But yeah, the first option, Patrick, from our side. Heading over to you.
Thank you. So on the first question, I have two examples. One is from Bayern Munich, where we combined event data with tracking data. And we had for the event data 3 different sources, one from the league, one from Wisecout, which is the parallel to Hudl, and one from manual created with Sportscode. And then we had an output report, which some of you know, for this player, which has the corporate identity in this, which is nice looking, but and it has the items, the performance items for this player and for this position only. So we limited that in a nice way, and we combined it with video. So I think it's then on the club and on the experts to decide which data to use. And we need to know as companies, okay, what data is available. For example, in hockey, we know the X and Y coordinates are available from Sportlogiq, and that's why we utilize these to then have charts on Sportscode, where we have the rings, etc., and the certain zones, and we know where the events happen. So that's for that. And then I want to answer just part of the question. Second question, I have a coach in the Bundesliga who's collecting every single exchange with the player. He has an Excel sheet, and he's collecting on the mental part, on what they discussed, how he felt after game, after training session, and this is how he developed. Wants to engage with him on the mental part. But
yeah, from combining. So a few years ago, we did a test with the Welsh Rugby Union with the referees, and we were looking at the physical data. So what we had was a timeline with all of the event data in it, so decisions made and everything, but also the physical data. And the physical coaches were most interested in obviously high heart rates of the referees. And we found that the highest heart rate of the referee was not after prolonged periods of exertion, it was just before making important decisions. So the heart rate, the highest one in this particular game, the game was really tight, so it was a close game, and he was having to make a decision on whether to issue a red card to a player or not, which would obviously impact the game. So we do look at it, that's one way, and that was catapult data we were ingesting at the time. So you can combine it on a timeline visually to see that, but there's a few studies out there. So there's lots of different studies with discrete skills. So isolated skills, which you can replicate, again, whether it be in a lab environment or whether it be in a field setting. But again, it's very, very difficult to just keep replicating those in real world situations because of the fact that the situation within the game and the physical state of the player can change throughout the game. So you don't know if it's late in the game as a player carrying an injury. You might not even know he's carrying an injury because I suppose you have interns who will collect wellness scores on players. You know, how do you get a piece of data that says, how do you feel today? You know, if you're about to go in for selection to whether it be to a representative team or whether it be to your first team, so you're stepping up from a junior level to a senior level and you're carrying an injury, are you going to tell the coach that you're carrying an injury? Probably not. So you would then rely on the physical staff to say, is the player ready mentally? Even if they are injured, can they push through that? Can they work through that? Or do you give them some type of physical assistance in the sense of, you know, whether you're injecting players to play in games, important games and things like that. But combinations of data in that sense, I think for research purposes, for academic purposes, are really important that you have as many, like I'm a mixed methods type of person. So I would look for as many different points of view as I possibly can to try and make an informed decision on that.
Thank you. Maybe a quick answer from Freddie and Sean. Starting with Freddie. Do you have any additional comments beyond what's already been said?
From the question from Patrick, no, I can just, I think when it comes to like, if you're measuring health, if you say that this is health, I think different clubs has a different way to measure it. I just pinpoint that it's important to also look at the health of the player. What's health? It could be a questionnaire, as you said. It could be heart rate variability, for instance. I think different clubs have different ways to measure it. So they're saying that this is the goal, I think that's the wrong way to go, because everyone is doing a little bit different. But still, it's important to take care of the player's health, and that's where you come in. That maybe from that data that a club is bringing in, you visualize and then doing the best to bring in more knowledge to the people working around the player. For example, me in ours in Malmö Redhawks, maybe we are doing different kind of physical tests if you compare it to Frölunda, compared to Färjestad, but all of us is doing physical tests is from the physical standpoint, and from that point of view, you maybe have different kind of ways to visualize it, and also doing statistical things on it.
Thank you. And Sean, what's your take on these two questions?
I would just really quickly, if this speaks to Patrick's question, I think it does. I'm just thinking of sort of the in-game predictors, measurements. How could you use it? A couple of clubs that I know of specifically, one thing you might do is either distance skated or time on ice over time through a game, projecting out to how that compares to an individual player's benchmark. If you were doing that, period by period, you might see this player's on pace to play 4 more minutes than they usually do. And here's what tends to happen when they play more than usual or skated further than regular. So in terms of an in-game adjustment, I can see that as something that will grow with teams, where health data tells you this player falls off when they get to 20 minutes in a game. They're on pace to get to 21. We need to adjust that in game as an adjustment. Just sort of one example, I think, that speaks to what Patrick was saying. The other one, he mentioned XG. Patrick, you mentioned specifically, even for us, we have several different models that we've built internally. So the thought of everyone having kind of their own, or clubs having their own, makes a lot of sense, because there are lots of tweaks that someone might apply to this. Even for us, we have a couple different iterations of what we do. So certainly that integration of different ways of looking at XG as an example is something that we do even ourselves, and I know teams do for themselves as well.
Thank you. Anyone want to have a go at the final question, or everybody want to speak up? I think we thank the panel